There have been a lot of recent insights, and they tend to show up on these little sticky notes here. And one of the most recent ones is that dealing with thoughts, dealing with this abstract potential reality is a pebble in the hand. And the way we can basically do that is, if you want to participate here, we hold your hand like this, and now imagine a black pebble that's perfectly smooth right in the palm of the hand. Then we say, is that a pebble? And you will see some people will start to think about it and see if they can come up with the correct answer. But really, it really comes down to something that's very, very simple. Verification is this simple. It's not a verbal answer. It's this. If we start putting verification into practice, if we start putting our literal objective reality, our direct experience into practice through a motion of attention into verification, things begin to get a lot clearer. There are a lot of thoughts that will arise that will refer to something else or another thought or something that cannot be verified here, yet for some reason we continue to entertain it. It's the essence of how a narrative is built. So, for instance, if we were in a relationship, let's say, just a conversation with someone, and they were behaving in a way that was a little bit more careless or rude, and the thought arises, oh, they're being rude. If we don't move into verification immediately, that is essentially the seed being planted of a narrative. Because we start entertaining those thoughts, we keep engaging, and then another thought comes up, yeah, they're definitely not being very nice. Oh man, they probably don't like me very much. I wonder what I did. I wonder if they're having a bad day. And then we just keep going on those particular paths. And before we know it, we have a pretty big chunk of a narrative. You might find this with anybody that you don't get along with, that there's quite a narrative there. And I know this is kind of pushes the envelope, so to speak, when it comes to some of the unwritten rules when it comes to our social relationships, yet verification would look something like this. Do you intend to be rude in the midst of this conversation, or did I do something to upset you? Something along those lines. I know that sounds really, really outside of how we would normally conduct ourselves, yet that's what verification would look like. If it seems like someone is being hurtful, then we can just say, hey, do you intend to be hurtful? And then it's an opportunity for a closer conversation. I know that doesn't necessarily always fit with certain aspects of certain relationships, yet that's just kind of a rough example of what verification looks like. And ultimately, it comes down to sensations. It comes down to our emotional state, that if we step into feeling frustrated, that the mind will already label it as frustration. It'll insert itself and give a context, and then we can step into that sensation a little bit more directly instead of basically bottling ourselves up with the conceptual narrative. Frustration usually means I have to do something about this. It means I have to find a solution to something. If you look at all of those bits and pieces, they stay in the conceptual. But if we go to what's initial, I'm feeling frustrated, and we start to feel those sensations, then we can begin to ask, is there anything in this sensation that is verifiably frustration? Is there anything in this sensation that is verifiably unlikable or uncomfortable? And that's where we begin to unfold through verification. It can show up in other ways as well, yet what that does is it helps us move attention into something that is actual, literal, objective, obvious. And when we move attention into what's obvious, then we start to discover a lot more about attention itself, that attention seems to be what we truly are: consciousness, awareness. Yet the power of attention is a little bit more specific. For instance, when we think of consciousness or we use the word awareness, it tends to be objectified out here, some kind of maybe umbrella of experience, maybe at the furthest reaches of what we're noticing. Yet attention itself, if we use the word attention, tends to be a lot closer to home. It tends to have an intimate quality. It feels more personal. that's essentially what verification is all about, is beginning to play with attention itself in a very literal and fundamental way. And as we begin to do so, a lot of these particular mechanisms, these particular narratives that have been built up over time, these constructs, they begin to fall apart naturally on their own, because if we cannot find any frustration in this sensation or these group of sensations that have been called frustration, that becomes interesting. That might actually guide enough curiosity that we can continue to look into that. We continue to explore. So, pebble in the hand, imagine that pebble. There's really no answer, verbally anyway. Is that a pebble? We just open the hand. And even then, we still don't need a verbal answer. It's just being verified or not verified. And as soon as we realize that that particular thought cannot be verified, then we don't entertain it any further, and we move into our fundamental, objective, literal experience. This video basically is covering an aspect of moving attention into what we can verify, and there is a huge, huge importance to this. Because if we can verify it, then we don't have to live in a conceptual experience with those sorts of things. Maybe give it a shot. Continue to verify and explore with ways to verify, and I'm sure there's probably a whole variety of questions that come up around this, so please feel free to ask. Thanks.